Water management in the built environment represents one of the most critical and, paradoxically, neglected challenges in the history of modern urbanization. The Barboza Cities channel, focused on cities' skylines, is ready to show you what the game doesn't cover. Hydrography, far from being just a scenic element or a technical obstacle, constitutes the fundamental biological infrastructure that makes any human settlement viable. This video details the history of the relationship between humanity and its rivers, the disastrous consequences of burying watercourses in favor of automobiles, and the emerging planning models that seek reconciliation with the water cycle. Well, folks, before we start the main topic of this episode about rivers and hydrography, I want to talk to you about the rail situation. In the last episode, we established the industrial and logistics region of our city in all four corners of our master planned core, which you could follow in episode 7. Well, I wanted to tell you that between that episode and this one, I've already finished it. Here, look, the entire railway, right? The whole railway layout around our master planned core between here, the highway, and the beginning of the neighborhood, okay? Besides the 4 freight stations we have here at the 4 ends of our pilot plan, we also have the passenger stations, okay? Here in the South Zone, we have 4 stations. In the East Zone, 4 stations. In the North Zone, 4 stations. And in the West Zone, 4 stations. And they're positioned right here at the end of these avenues that don't lead anywhere, right? Theoretically, because they don't connect here. Look, with the highway, you see. We have some avenues that are highways that connect here at an intersection. There's this other avenue that also connects to the highway with another direct intersection. But there are these avenues here, look, that in the end didn't lead anywhere. And they are very well spaced and connected to passenger train stations, okay? Between 2 superblocks, right? For example, this one here, look, it's between this industrial superblock, so whoever works in the industry can come by train, and this residential superblock. The same thing here, look, it's between 2 residential superblocks. The residents of these 2 superblocks will be able to use this station. So, in total, we have 16 train stations, okay? On the edges of the city here. I've also already made these small intersections here for the train tracks. Right? Because they come from outside the city, see? They come from outside and they needed to come into the master planned core here. So I did it this way, okay? They split. One here goes to the right and joins the route, and the other goes to the left, which also joins the route. Along this railway area, right, we have double tracks. One for cargo and the other for passengers, right? Only here at the corners did I end up adding more tracks, to simulate parking. But there it's also doubled, because here, right, this track goes straight to the cargo station. And this one is express for passengers. Or whoever isn't going to the cargo station comes around here on the outside. That's how it turned out, just sharing this small change with you and already giving a spoiler about the public transportation here in this waterway episode, right?
Certo.
The history of civilization is the history of control over and proximity to water. The first major human settlements did not occur in random places. They were dictated by the presence of river basins, which offered transportation, defense, and above all, sustenance through irrigated agriculture. The so-called hydraulic societies, such as those of Mesopotamia in the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates, or ancient Egypt along the Nile, established the foundations of urban planning around the seasonal management of water. The river was not seen as a problem to be solved, but as the sacred source of social and economic order. In ancient cities, the water system determined the layout of the streets and the location of public buildings. The canals were important components, integrated into the urban fabric, serving simultaneously for drainage, supply, and waste disposal, as seen in the Cloaca Maxima of Rome. For centuries, humanity maintained a symbiotic relationship with the floodplain areas, respecting the flood periods that fertilize the adjacent lands and allowing the renewal of river ecosystems. The rupture of this relationship, this symbiotic relationship, began to manifest with the Industrial Revolution and the advent of sanitary urbanism in the 19th century. The increasing population density and industrial pollution turned urban rivers into vectors for diseases such as cholera and typhoid fever. The response from urban planning at the time, exemplified by Haussmann's reforms in Paris, was the stripping away of the river's natural character. The river, once the center of public life, came to be seen as a public health threat that needed to be channeled, straightened, and eventually hidden from the citizens' view. To ensure order and public health, this hygienist model established the premise that civil engineering should act aggressively against natural systems, a mentality that would persist and intensify in the following century. Alright, so here we go, guys. Here it is, right? The entirety of our master plan. And, well, we already have the cardinal points established here as well, right? Along with our cardinal parks, South Park, East Park, North Park, and West Park. There also came the 4 zones, plus the central zone. So the map is made to be viewed this way. We have a river with a lake here to the north, and we also have a river that passes here to the south. This river here is to the south, right? It continues around the outside here. You can't see it, but when I created the map, I was thinking of a curve on the outside. And, well, the center of this map doesn't have any body of water. And I thought it would be very strategic if one was created artificially, a canal connecting the 2 bodies of water here inside the city, for water transport, tourism, and other purposes. And we could also take the opportunity to talk about urban hydrology in big cities. And that's what I intend to do in today's episode. It wasn't necessary, but I wanted to make things even more complex, just to raise the level of Vale Central one more notch. So I opened the map drawing with the TSL map view mod, so we could do this planning here. And well, down here, look right here, we have a small depression. There's a hill here and a mountain over here, but here there's a flat area where we could run a canal here, creating a delta, right, and bringing this river towards the city. Well, I'm going to avoid the intersections, and I think I'm going to bring it over here so that we turn these blocks here, look into canals. And then I would disconnect the path here. I'll try not to make it too straight so we can also add to the level of difficulty. And even though this isn't a natural river, right? It's an artificial river. I want to set an example here and show that I'm preserving its curves. Look, I've already curved it in a C shape here, see, around this whole super block, and I'm going to bring it over here. Here it can go straight. I'm also going to avoid bringing the river to the straight highway. Lowered here, it doesn't make sense, so I'll direct it toward the park. So here we already have this riverbed up to our Powers Park, which can, you see, have freer curves here and come out on this other side. No, our goal is to bring it up here, right? So I'm going to start going up here and make another curve here to the corner so I don't hit the central square here in the middle of the block. From the suburb, the center of the super block, right? And then I can come out up here and already make a connection here. Look, with an additional arm, look, from this river, and that's good. Look, both sides here connected, right? In a river that kind of does the... But I'll make it a bit more complex. I think I'm going to create another tributary here in the central park that will run towards the mountains here to the east. Why is that, Barboza? Because I think I'm going to make a waterfall here, which will flow into this river, right? It can come from here, look, from this mountain, okay? And we get another branch over here. Little by little, we're filling our master plan with water, right? Well, this side of the city ended up without a river, right? I think I'm going to add one so it connects from here to here, look, from here until it meets here. And we get an outline around the outside, right? Well, that's the idea. Of course, in the game, maybe we won't be able to do it exactly like this, but I'll try to follow it as closely as possible. What do you guys think of the plan? And now, let's get to work and start making these walkways, these canals, cutting through Vale Central.
Wow.
In the 20th century, the rise of the automobile as the absolute protagonist of urban planning sealed the fate of many metropolitan rivers. The developmentalist paradigm saw river valleys as the ideal places for building expressways and valley-bottom avenues, given their naturally flat and continuous topography. Cities around the world. Cities in major Brazilian centers such as Belo Horizonte and São Paulo began a systematic process of swallowing their rivers with layers of asphalt. In Belo Horizonte, for example, the rapid growth starting in the 1950s transformed the landscape of the capital of Minas Gerais. Ribeirão Arrudas, once a point of reference and affection for the residents, was channeled and straightened in several sections to make way for Avenida Teresa Cristina and other traffic flow roads. This process was not just an engineering project, but a deliberate political choice that prioritized vehicle flow over the health of the watercourses. By being covered and turned into enclosed channels, the rivers lost their self-purification capacity and stopped functioning as microclimate regulators. The consequences of this neglect of waterways are profound and extend across various dimensions of urban life. We have soil sealing, since the replacement of natural banks with concrete and asphalt prevents water from infiltrating into the groundwater table. This drastically increases surface runoff during heavy rains. We also have an increase in the speed of water flow, since straightened and smooth channels accelerate the movement of water, and that water arrives with greater force, leaving less time to respond. Another problem is the irregular occupation of the floodplain. By ignoring that the river needs space to overflow, urban planning simply carries on. It allowed the occupation of floodplains by housing and infrastructure, creating inevitable scenarios of human tragedies and economic losses. The burying of rivers removes the presence of nature from the daily lives of citizens, breaking the historical and cultural relationship of the population with their territory. The failure to include water systems as a fundamental topic in urban planning is reflected in the lack of basic technical tools in most municipalities. Data from IBGE and the Eleita Association indicate that only 27 master plans in Brazil include preventive measures against flooding, and only 5.6% of the cities have geotechnical maps that analyze the suitability of the soil for safe urbanization. This technical blind spot leaves public officials reliant on disaster declarations, acting only after the disaster has already happened, instead of addressing the root of the problem. Poor planning for waterways manifests itself through recurring crises in metropolises, which ignore the laws of nature in favor of uncontrolled expansion. The analysis of international and Brazilian cities reveals common patterns of technical errors and ineffective governance. In New Orleans, in the United States, we have a striking example of the vulnerability created by excessive dependence on rigid infrastructures. Located mostly below sea level, the city relied on a complex system of more than 350 miles of levees and pumping stations to stay dry. However, in 2005, the force of Hurricane Katrina exposed the critical flaws of this model. A section of the flood wall on the 17th Street Canal gave way, allowing the waters of Lake Pontchartrain to flood the Lakeview neighborhood and much of the metropolis. The tragedy in New Orleans showed that the heavy engineering system, when not integrated into an ecological watershed vision, they create a false sense of security, which can lead to irreversible catastrophes. In Mumbai, India, the city faces annual flooding due to the systematic destruction of its natural infrastructure. But mangroves, wetlands, and salt marshes, which used to function as natural sponges to absorb the monsoons, were covered by concrete. Mumbai's drainage system has a functional capacity of only 45 millimeters per hour, which is insufficient to handle rainfall that can reach up to 550 millimeters in 3 days. In addition, pollution and encroachment on the Myth River, a crucial drainage channel, have nullified its ecological function, resulting in urban chaos and constant loss of life. Jakarta in Indonesia suffers from an additional problem: subsidence. The uncontrolled extraction of groundwater and the weight of urban buildings are causing the city to sink, while the 13 rivers that cross the capital are clogged with waste and surrounded by concrete channels that cannot drain Indonesia's waters. The situation is so critical that the Indonesian government has begun the process of transferring the federal capital to a new location, planned on the island of Borneo. In the Brazilian context, Recife stands out as one of the cities most threatened by the advancing sea and an insufficient capacity to handle rainfall measured in millimeters per day. The problem is drainage. Urban constructions have nullified the effectiveness of crucial drainage, and the drains are clogged despite their importance, causing water accumulation. Inequality, drainage of the constructions, the drainage system of urban constructions. The problem is rooted in inequality. The drainage system has been nullified, they are clogged, and urban constructions are clogged, drainage clogged. The problem, despite inequality, is the function and weight of inequality. Crucial drainage from the constructions, despite being urban drainage, they are clogged, their function has been nullified, constructions clogged with problems, inequality, crucial, clogged with water. Urban constructions are clogged despite drainage. São Paulo, in turn, is the national symbol of buried waterways. The capital of São Paulo straightened its major rivers, Tietê and Pinheiros, and covered hundreds of smaller streams to make way for the marginal avenues and the lowland areas. Today, the city spends a fortune maintaining large detention reservoirs, which are stopgap solutions and have a high visual impact. To try to mitigate the almost total impermeabilization of its watershed.
Why do so many floods happen? When it rains, the river can't always handle the amount of water in its normal bed, so this extra volume of water flows into its expanded bed, the river's floodplain.
It's time to get to work and start building the channels. Well, how is this going to be done, okay? I'm going to do an example here, and then I'll apply this same example to the rest of the channels, because it's going to take a long time and be very repetitive. So I'll spare you. Well, it's basically going to be like this. I'm going to come here to the block that will receive the channel, and I'm going to set a depth. We have a terrain height here of 60 meters, but I'm going to lower it by 15 meters, and you might even think, Barbosa, that's really deep. And it really is, okay? But I did some tests, and the type of quay I'm going to put here needs a slightly greater depth to make sense, right? Well, I'm going to make a diversion over here, so I'm going to build a quay here to help me with this detour, and I'm going to use dirt roads, okay? So I'm going to create one from here to here and another from here to here. I'll end up deleting this one, okay? These canals are going to break the grid pattern we've established so far in the series, okay? Some blocks will end up different, modified to adapt to the river's path. So in this episode, we'll have the very first exceptions to the plan, okay? So I'm going to create a few streets here just to help myself, all right? These streets here, they won't stay exactly here, but they help me get it right, the depth of the canal. Here I think I'm going to make more of a detour this way so we can bring this canal over here. Look at how this layout is already turning out. And from here, I'm going to connect it with another river coming from here, right? But from here, we can already direct this canal toward the park, okay? Look, from here, it can already go north, straight ahead to come out at the park. And I was doing it wrong in there, okay? This path here to the right, it's going to meet another river here. Look, that's going to come from a waterfall, right? Actually, I was supposed to start going up here and come out at the park through here, okay? I've already made the path. So from here, we can already start drawing more freely inside the park. All right, so now how am I going to make this structure, right? The channel. Well, guys, first I have to define which streets are going to cross the channel, right? Because there's no point in letting every street cross from one side to the other here. Why? Because there would be a million bridges, right? And bridges are expensive, so we have to prioritize which ones we're going to keep. And I'm always going to keep these here. Look, the ones that cross from one side to the other inside the superblocks, okay? These are the ones that usually meet here, look, inside the superblock. And all the superblocks have these streets right here, look. You already have this one, right? Look at these. So they will have priority over the channel bed. That's why I'm already going to force it here. Look, the overpass. On them. Of course, the avenues will also have priority, right? It doesn't even make sense for me to eliminate this avenue here, right? Let traffic keep flowing. Man, sometimes your brain glitches a little with all these streets we're making here, but as long as you stay focused, it's no problem. And guys, look, I have to run this river through here, right? And this is where we have the meeting point in the center of the superblock, and there's also the avenue running diagonally. And when the canal runs through here like this, the diagonal avenue will be interrupted, forcing drivers to go around. It won't be like this throughout the entire superblock, but in this situation, that's what's going to happen, all right? It's not going to be a big deal. He'll just have to take a detour here and then. Look, continue on his way along the diagonal avenue just like he was doing before. And here, this will be turned into an overpass, all right? It's set here, look, the priorities for crossing the bridges, right, over the canal. We removed quite a few bridges here, so this area is pretty good now. And I'm going to do pretty much the same thing I showed you guys here, but now in this northern part, right, in the north zone, coming out here in this body of water, okay? All right, guys, I did it here. Look, all the canals that were planned. Okay, in our initial plan. And they're already here with the viaduct priorities fully applied. Okay. And now, right, what we still need to do is actually put in a key wall before letting the water in. That's why I was studying and checking which canal fits best here. Well, I tested this one. Okay, but it would stick out too much here in the gap, and that would make the river really narrow. If we were to put it here, look, on both sides, okay? That's not what I want. What I want is to keep the walkway, okay? I want there to be a walkway so that these canals can also be a leisure area. I tested this one too, right? But it would have the same problem of having a very narrow watercourse here. That's when, guys, I put this level breakwater with pedestrian walkways on the upper and lower levels. And man, I thought it was perfect. Okay, because we get a nice open space here for the watercourse. We can combine it with this other level embankment, but with stairs that will give access to the lower walkway, okay? And then, man, it's going to look like a Parisian canal here, you know, kind of like Paris style, and it's going to be really cool. Plus, we get a small strip of grass here where we can add some shade along this upper walkway, right, on both sides. So, look, it would end up looking something like this, right? No water for now, but I believe this is the ideal result here for us to make our walkways, our canal, and our watercourse down here, right? It won't be that deep, but I also don't want the river to be too deep. And that's why I used 45 meters of depth, right? Because if it were less, this walkway here on the lower level would be covered with dirt. So I think it's the perfect size here, right? Now I just need to apply this to the rest of the channels we've made. For that, I'm going to use Network Anarchy, the parallel creation mode, and I'll start selecting all the nodes that correspond to our channel, right? And there's no end to it. You can keep going all the way to the other side. See? And now I'm already here, see, on the other side of the city. I'm going to place this channel. I'm leaving a gap, right? That's the ideal way, right? It's so the ground doesn't keep glitching here at 16 meters. I placed it here. I'm going to apply it, see, and this is the ground glitch I'm talking about, okay? Here, I think we can fix it, but if we add more space, it stands out more here. It keeps sticking out. Then we get the channel, see, in its full layout. Look, the whole path we drew here, okay? Now I'm going to do the other side and it'll be done. Look, we can already clearly see the channel's path here. Look, right here in the suburbs. And we already have the walls on both sides. And I'm also going to build the other embankments, right, on the other channels here, see? Here we don't have it yet. And over here we don't have it either. Look, on either side. Anyway, I'll keep working on this here. And it's worth mentioning that I also made the rivers meet here in the Central Park with this kind of layout. Given the failure of purely gray solutions, Contemporary urbanism is redesigning the relationship between cities and their rivers through revitalization and the daylighting technique, or reopening of watercourses. These interventions aim not only at flood control, but also at restoring urban and environmental dignity. The restoration of the river, which has already appeared on the channel, which is this name showing up here that I won't say in Korean. In Seoul, South Korea, it is globally recognized as the boldest example of urban revitalization. For decades, the river was an open sewer covered by a 6-lane elevated highway that carried more than 160,000 vehicles a day. In 2003, under the leadership of then-Mayor Lee Myung-bak, the highway was demolished to bring the river back to the surface. The 5.8-kilometer-long project involved removing 75% of the concrete and asphalt, which were reused in other construction works. To ensure a constant flow, purified water from the Han River is pumped into the channel. The results have been transformative. The temperature along the river is 3 to 6 degrees lower than in nearby areas, just a few blocks away. The project attracted 75 million visitors in the first 3 years, transforming a decaying area into a center of culture and tourism. And noise and air pollution levels dropped, improving the respiratory health of the local population. People are saving their excitement for the episodes of Vale Central. In the last episode, we reached the top 100 most hyped videos here on YouTube in the games category. Thank you very much. Check if you still have some hype left. Please hype up this video. Let's put Vale Central at the top again, and maybe more people will get to know it and move here to our capital. Check if you've liked the video, if you're subscribed, and if you just got here, welcome. You deserve to bathe in the clear and refreshing waters of the river on a hot, sunny day. In the Netherlands, the city of Utrecht accomplished something similar by reopening a Dutch canal as well. It will be missing here in the video. That's the name of the canal, which was reopened back in 2020. The section had been turned into a highway more than 40 years ago to accommodate the Brazilian community. The decision to return the space to water allowed recreational boats and swimmers to circulate again in the heart of the city, proving that removing road infrastructure can generate social benefits that outweigh smoother traffic flow. And in Brazil, Curitiba adopted the creation of linear parks as a low-impact strategy for drainage management since 2003. Parks like Barigui, Tingui, and São Lourenço were implemented in strategic floodplain areas. When heavy rains occur, the lakes in these parks function as natural retention reservoirs, allowing the rivers to overflow within the green areas without reaching the neighboring homes. In addition to their water management function, these spaces preserve the riparian forest, offer free recreational opportunities, and prevent new irregular settlements in risk areas. For new cities or urban expansions, such as the case of Vale Central, the sponge city model, conceived by the Chinese architect Kongjian Yu, proposes a radical change. Instead of channeling water out as quickly as possible, the city should be designed to absorb, filter, and store rainwater on site. Yu's philosophy is based on absorbing, not containing, teaching cities to coexist with the natural water dynamics. Implementing a sponge city requires the integration of green, blue, and gray infrastructure, that is, permeable pavements, and the use of materials that allow water to infiltrate directly into the soil. Rain gardens and bioswales are shallow vegetated depressions that capture water from the streets, allowing for the natural filtration of pollutants before infiltration. These spaces could occupy the side edge of the sidewalk between parking spaces, for example. Another thing that also helps a lot is green roofs, which are vegetated coverings that retain rainwater, reduce urban heat, and decrease the load on the stormwater drainage system. Floodable parks and wetlands, climate leisure spaces.
Sobre o sistema de drenagem pluvial, parques alagáveis e áreas úmidas, espaços de lazer que...
They are technically designed to allow temporary flooding, functioning as large detention basins that enrich urban biodiversity. The success of this model is already visible in pilot cities. In China itself, right? Like Wuhan, the goal is for 80% of urban areas to be able to retain at least 70% of rainwater by 2030. The city of Berlin in Germany has also adopted the goal of becoming a sponge city, removing asphalt paving and creating green infiltration areas in new developments, such as Altershof. Well, all the channels have been created, and from here we can already see the path of the water, right? I've already set up the water flow here, and we managed to do it successfully. To connect these two sides here, these two bodies of water, through an artificial channel here in the middle of our city, and in the master planned core. From a distance, unfortunately, the view gets kind of buggy like this, okay? And man, it's a bit annoying, right? Because when we want to see the whole thing, we can't do it very clearly. But up close, look how amazing this turned out. The water level is perfect here for the canal. The width is also really good. This is the narrowest point, okay? Yeah, actually, I think the narrowest point ends up being right here in these curves. Look, here's the narrowest point. Of all the canals, okay? There are other spots that are this width, but I still think it's enough for us to keep the canal navigable, all right? We can see here, look, along the path of the ferry line, and we can manage to create a navigable passage through here. So in the future, we could have public transportation lines by ferry, all right? So I'm going to quickly go through all the canals we've created with you. Let's start here on the south side, okay? Here, look, starting from the river, something that didn't turn out quite right was the water flow, okay? I couldn't get this to work in a logical way, but that's not a problem. It's just a detail, okay? The direction of the water flow, because the idea to make the canal, these canals, came later, after the series was already created, after the map was already made. So I didn't take that into consideration when I made the map. But anyway, look, we're going to start here on the south side. And we managed to make it so it's not completely straight, right? Yeah, the bridges, they're really well spaced, okay? Here we have a delta, right? Yeah, this side here, it goes to the Central Park, right? And this side here also goes to the Central Park. But look, it goes around here on the outside, okay? So we can also cover a lot of this southern region of downtown, right? And then I even took the opportunity to make a little island here and everything. I'm going to go right here, since it's the longer way. I put the avenue crossings, this prettier bridge here from the DLC bridge bridging piers, right? It has a much better style than the regular bridge, which is this one here, with just a pillar in the middle. Then you might ask, Barboza, why don't you also put the prettier bridge here, right? We actually have it here, but the arches end up being too small, right? The boat won't be able to pass through here. And this street here, it's two-way. We don't have that pretty bridge in a one-way version. And just a reminder, we prioritized building bridges, crossings from one side to the other on these main roads here, okay? These ones here, they always cross, okay? So it's one way, you can't suddenly make it two-way here because it would mess up all the planning. So that's the bridge we ended up with. You can notice along the embankment, there are these little stairs here, spaced at really nice intervals. It's great for people to come down here and walk around below. So you can pretty much walk through the whole city down here, okay? Because in many places, these embankment walkways down here are continuous. So you can even go for a walk and board the ferry. I'll put the ferry down here. So to catch the ferry, you'll have to go down the stairs. Yeah, there comes a point when we have a more complex crossing. Okay, that's when our diagonal roads, okay, they cross the canal. It's a main shortcut road, right? A diagonal connection. And it couldn't just end because of the canal. And it also couldn't connect here at ground level because that would make for a really crazy intersection, okay? So my solution was to make these overpasses here, see? And then, yes, I used this nicer bridge, okay? Because the diagonal roads are two-way. One lane goes one way and the other comes back. So I was able to use this bridge here. And man, it turned out nice here because there are the arches, right? You can even create a vibe kind of like the Arcos de Lapa anyway. So every time the diagonal avenues, right? The diagonal paths cross the canal, we have these arches, right? Well, let's keep going here. There are also these cases where I put a pedestrian path here. This pedestrian path is always at the intersection of these linear park roads, right? So, also, whenever this happens, we have a pedestrian path. I put some palm trees to do landscaping along with the trees here by the canal. And man, it turned out really cool. It looks great, right? Here we have a diagonal road, which is the diagonal road that enters the city, right? Here by the sunken highway, you see? And man, we already have 2 bridges here making this crossing. And it wouldn't make sense for me to put 2 more bridges here connecting one side to the other. Okay? So I preferred to remove them here, make it cleaner, tidier, right? Besides also lowering the construction cost and leaving just these 2 bridges, the guy who comes off the diagonal highway here, right? He'll be able to go this way. Look, I even increased the number of lanes. There are 3 lanes this way. And to go around here, right? There are also 3 lanes. And to return to the diagonal road here, look. And anyway, then he chooses where to go. So whenever this happens, we'll also have this setup, this scenario. And I also like that the key here curves a little, right? Because it helps to break the water flow a bit. It doesn't get too fast. This setup is really cool. I liked it a lot. I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot of buildings around here. I think modern buildings would look great here, kind of a modernist style. I don't know, like wall-to-wall style here, you know? Kind of like Copacabana. Kind of like Uruguay, right? Montevideo, Buenos Aires. It would look really, really, really beautiful, okay? And here the river channel meets the others here in the park. And over here we have one of the outlets. One of the exits comes this way, see? And it goes through Avenida do Cinturão. It reaches here in the suburbs. So this is a suburban area. And it comes out here in this delta, okay? And also passing underneath Rodovia do Contorno and Ferrovia do Contorno. And now I just need to show you this branch here, which is the branch that comes from the mountain spring, okay? So we also have a channel here. It's a little narrower, right? I wanted to change the width a little to make it a bit different, but it's not really that much narrower. And we're going to cross this suburban area here again, which gets even narrower, right? And over here, we have the river that comes from the mountain spring, right? The spring comes here. I even put some little rocks. There's an old cemetery here to decorate this spring. And that's how it turned out, folks. Several artificial canals created here in Vale Central. And I want to tell you that this part here, the hydraulic waterway part of the series of the city, contrasts with the urban planning concepts we've been presenting in this series. They will be the least effective. Why? Well, because of the game itself, okay? The game doesn't have a flood system. It doesn't have a tide system. It doesn't have a complex water system. So there's no way for us to simulate all these issues we've discussed here about the problem of cities planning poorly when it comes to waterways and water management. So these canals here were mainly added to increase the challenge of the series and to improve the landscaping of the series, which turned out really beautiful. And I also took advantage of the space to present to you some urban concepts and good and bad examples from around the world. So we can keep learning a little bit, right? That's the focus of the Barbosa Cities channel, and especially of this Vale Central series. And I'm really happy when someone comments that they learned something new in the video. But anyway, guys, I'm just going to show you how I plan to place this ferry here. It's going to be a bit of a makeshift solution, okay? We have a ferry stop that needs to be placed on a road. So I'm going to put it here, right? I have to put it here. And then it even glitched with the other road that's around here. So I'm going to use the Network Multi-Tool mod to unlock this road that already comes with it, see? And make it independent from the construction. So what can I do? Delete only the road instead of deleting the ferry stop along with it. This way, I can move the ferry stop wherever I want. And here, see, it's way too high, right? For the ferry to stop here, this actually looks pretty bad. Because this ferry point, actually, it should be here, see? And that's what I'm going to do, right? Put it here in the lower canal, right? On the lower path. And then it's going to ask for a road, right? But we can solve this here, see, in a relatively easy way by creating access through here, okay? It's a street that's closer to the ferry point than this one here, right? And it's good because it can even serve as a bus stop, right? So buses can stop here and people can already make the connection with the ferry, right? And it already recognizes that it's connected to the road. I think there will be some bugs, like people getting off right here, right? but at least it will be functional, and that's what I plan to do here, see? Along all the canals. But that's it for now, okay? I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, the tours we took and the lessons we learned, all right? When the system is inaugurated here, the mayor will invite you all to take a tour through the canals here in Vale Central, our capital and fully planned city. Urban planning in the 21st century requires the humility to recognize that water is not a technical problem to be buried, but the essence of life that should be celebrated. Throughout this video, we saw how the separation between the asphalt and the river created 6 cities, vulnerable and disconnected from their own history. However, the examples of Seoul, Utrecht, and Curitiba show us that there is always a way back to the blue and the green. For the future, the message is one of critical optimism. Respecting the natural water system in urban planning is an act of humanity. It means designing cities that breathe, that absorb rain with the generosity of a sponge, and that offer their inhabitants the right to the horizon and the freshness of a clean river. May our master plans stop being just maps of concrete and start being treated like musical scores, where water and asphalt play in harmony. The ideal city is not the one that dominates nature, but the one that allows itself to be shaped by it. When we bring the river back to the surface, we're not just restoring its course. We are restoring our own ability to coexist and our hope for the future, where technology and ecology go hand in hand to create truly resilient and, above all, beautiful homes. May the water flow freely, may the banks blossom, and may our cities finally learn to smile at their rivers.